Hello, greetings, and thank you for joining me. Conspiracy theory or fact? That is the question. Not quite Shakespeare, however. In 1997, Britain elected a Labour government, and it was headed up by Tony Blair. And he was Prime Minister from 97 to 2007. During his tenure, it was about 99, I think, from recollection. During his tenure, he was extorting the values of a digital currency. And I remember he was on TV and he said, if we had a digital currency, it would eliminate the black market, you know, people doing jobs for cash or people not declaring all their income, etc., etc. And we could reduce taxes by about 10%. Now, you know, when have you ever known a government in your entire life to reduce taxes, or should we say make savings and pass it on to the people? Fast forward a few years and we are heavily into a digital currency situation, and indeed successive governments are trying to push it and get us all into digital. I live in rural Thailand, and 10 or 12 years ago Tesco built a large supermarket in the next town, Chiang Kham, which is about 20 kilometers from me. And I went there and it's a cracking supermarket. But I thought to myself, I can't see this catching on, purely because the Thais like to shop at local markets, buy locally. So I can't see them, but indeed it has caught on, and it does do well. And I stand there in the line for the checkout, and there'll be a lady or a gentleman in front of me, predominantly ladies, and they're going to pay for the groceries or whatever. It might only be 100 baht, but they're whipping the mobile phone out. Well, they don't whip it out, they root through the bag instead of having it ready when they get to the checkout, but that's another thing. They root through the bag, get the mobile phone, put the PIN number in, find wherever they've stored the PIN number, and then they put the phone up against the whatever the Tesco have given them. I think it's a QR code, I don't know, and then they click it, and then they show that the transaction's gone through and they've paid for it. But it's not that fast, and I'm stood behind, hopping from foot to foot with cash in my hand, and I'd be through the checkouts with 10 times more groceries than what she's got, and I'd be paid and away. Anyway, that's by the by. I know a guy who's an engineer, and about, well, it must be 7 or 8 years ago, he got a contract in the south of France, and he was there for about 6 months. And he told me when he got back, he said I couldn't believe it. He said there was what we would term kids, late teenagers, early 20s. They're in a bar or a coffee shop and they're paying for a coffee or a beer with the mobile phone. He said, I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, in 1993, the NSA did a white paper on cryptocurrencies. The crypto wasn't even really thought about before then. I mean, don't get me started on crypto. It's nothing. It's nothing but a figment of someone's imagination. So is 9/11, the first Gulf War, Ukraine? The Ukraine war has been devastating to Ukraine. They're saying close on 1 million people have died in Ukraine. It beggars belief. What's the purpose? It's not about throwing Putin out. I mean, look, at the fall of the Soviet Union, when Gorbachev was the president of Russia, NATO, the West, did a deal and said we won't go any further east than where we are now. they've every year they've gone farther and farther and farther until bang, they're on the doorstep of Russia, looking to make Ukraine a member of NATO. Now, in the history of Russia, the two major times that Russia's been invaded, in the Napoleonic Wars and the Second World War, the invasion came via Ukraine. So clearly, Russia, Putin, were nervous about this. Anyway, forgetting the rights and wrongs of that conflict, the wrong is nearly 1 million people are dead. That's sweethearts that won't go home to girlfriends, fiancés that won't go home to their fiancé, husbands and fathers that won't be going home to their wives and children, children that won't be born because the men aren't there. The list goes on. You know, John Lennon once said that something like life's what happens when you're too busy trying to make a living, something of that ilk. And that's where we are. That's where we are right now. Where we are, or normal people, I'm not normal because I'm retired, but normal working people are too busy trying to make a living, pay the mortgage, pay the car loan, buy the groceries, get the kids into a good school, book a nice holiday somewhere. They're far too busy with that to really take notice of what's going on. And what is going on, as we go through the arch window, as they used to say on play school, what is going on is a gradual creeping barrage of control. 9/11, 19 Saudi-backed hijackers allegedly flew planes into the Twin Towers. I say allegedly because nobody knows what the real truth is, and it's okay saying I saw it on television. I saw it on television. I was watching it on the news and in disbelief, and then I saw the towers come down, one then the other. It come down a vertical drop, a drop with no resistance, and I went, wow! Couldn't believe it. So interested was I at the way the towers had come down. From a building perspective, I went online and I pulled up the schematics, the blueprints of the towers, and I looked at the steel structure, because they're steel frame buildings. I looked at the steel structures, and the vertical columns, I think they were 2 foot across by 5 foot deep. I'm going back a number of years, and they were, I think, 10 feet apart. So you're talking about a heavy steel beam that's 2 foot by 5 foot, and an aluminium aeroplane wing goes through it. I'm not buying that. Not only that, in all of history, in all of steel frame buildings history, no steel frame building has ever been totally brought down or collapsed due to fire alone. So a number of things, and the buildings came down in free fall. And of course, building 7, no aeroplane hit buildings, nothing hit building 7, but yet it came down again in free fall. And if you go online and you watch it, and as it starts to go down, you pause and you see the way that they demolish old office blocks that are no longer wanted or what have you. They bring them down again in the free fall, but the centre goes down momentarily before the rest start to come down, and that's to make it implode into itself. And that's what happened with building 7. You can see it as plain as day. So then the US and Britain and a few other allies, they invade Iraq, killing 3 million innocent Iraqis, when it was, they said it was Saudi sponsored hijackers that had done the deed. Go figure, as they say. So the conspiracy theory was that the Twin Towers were brought down, it was blamed on Iraq, and they attacked Iraq. Now, cobwebs. What was the common denominator? The common denominator here, Saddam Hussein said, I don't want to sell oil anymore in dollars. I want to sell it in euros. America couldn't have that. Knowing about commercial industrial buildings, which was my profession, I cannot believe that the Twin Towers was anything other than a controlled demolition. Believe me or believe me not, it matters not. That's what I think. My conspiracy theory. Gaddafi. They killed Gaddafi. Now, why did they overthrow Gaddafi and kill him? Well, funnily enough, Gaddafi said, I mean, in the UK, we were fed an absolute plethora of propaganda. Oh, state-sponsored terrorists, Gaddafi, all these terrorist cells training in Libya and blah, 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 blah. Gaddafi was a great ruler. You know, what he gave to the Libyan people in education and housing and hospitals and health service and everything. But Gaddafi said, I don't want to sell my oil in dollars anymore. I want to sell it in the gold-backed dinar. They couldn't have that, could they? You see, I'm not having a go at the US, far from it. Up to the end of the Second World War, the reserve currency of the world was the British pound. Well, Britain was bust pretty much after the First War and was definitely bust after the Second War, and the reserve currency became the dollar. So the US could print a piece of paper at a fraction of a penny and sell it to somebody who needed to buy oil at face value. So it costs you a penny to print and you sell it for $100. I mean, what an absolute stroke of genius that was. And it was Henry Kissinger who did the deal with the Saudis, with OPEC, to only sell the oil in dollars. And that, realistically, is what created America's great wealth. Imagine it. You make something for less than a penny and you sell it for $100. Wow, what a business that is. That's coming to an end. So perhaps that ties in with what's happening in Ukraine and why are they pushing the Russians so much, trying desperately to make Putin react against a NATO country. As a citizen of the world who doesn't believe in God, I've got to say, thank God, thank God that Trump was voted in, and hopefully he will keep his promise and end the wars. Now, will he end the war in the Middle East? I don't think so, because I think he's bought and paid for by you know who. And the situation is that if it was any other country in the world committing that genocide on a daily basis, starving people, bombing people, denying them medical attention, denying them, snipers killing journalists, snipers killing children, you know, any other country in the world, and that would have been, there would have been so many international sanctions on that country, they wouldn't be able to turn around, let alone keep it up for over a year. I'm not in favour of any war. I'm with Winston Churchill. Jaw is better than war. Now, another conspiracy theory was the pandemic. It wasn't, that wasn't a slip up. I firmly believe it was a pandemic. And for me, it was all about control. And it was a social experiment. I wonder if we can get the people to stay in their homes, to lock them, put them under house arrest for a while. Could we get away with it? This is the initial experiment on compliance. Resistance is futile. You will comply, we won't comply, and it isn't futile. Throughout the ages, people, eventually, when you push people enough, they stand up and they say, no, we're not having that, no more. And for me, the pandemic and all this nonsense with the vaccines that have now been proven never worked, never protected you against the virus. The figures were massaged. Is that a conspiracy? Medical associations were, if they put C19 on the death certificate. I mean, you know, we had a comedian in the UK called, it was part of a duo, Little and Large, and Eddie Large, he was large, obviously. He was a short, fat fella. Can you say that these days? Anyway, he was let's just say he was a gentleman who was challenged, vertically challenged, and of ample proportions. Eddie Large died when he was about 80, which is not a bad innings. But the news said comedian Eddie Large has sadly passed away today after testing positive for C19. What they didn't say, that for the last 20 odd years of his life, Eddie Large had suffered with his health, and he had a history of heart complaints. So short, overweight, heart attacks, heart complaints. It's hardly surprising he died in his 80s. In fact, I would say there was for what was up with him, it was good. But no, they had to say, they didn't say he died of C19. They said he died after testing positive for C19, giving the inference, you know, creating fear. We've got to get the jab, we've got to get the jab. May and I didn't take the jab. We were up in the city, and we're up at the large shopping centre where they had teams administering the jab, and people, the Thais, were queuing around the block to get the jab, and I'm looking at them shaking my head going, you morons, in my opinion. The masks, BMA, the British Medical Association, did, I think it was a 2-year analysis of wearing masks for the pandemic, and the conclusion was masks made little or no difference. In fact, masks had an adverse effect on people's health. In Asia, in the burning season, you see lots of people. In the burning season, when it's bad, when I go out, I have been seen wearing a mask, but the particles coming from the pollution are a lot bigger, and after a day wearing your mask outside, you can see it in the mask, a lot bigger than the virus. Our life didn't change here in the pandemic. We were able to come and go as we pleased, but the situation was that Asia, Thailand, the people are compliant. If the government say go and get a jab, they'll queue up, they'll go and get it. It's just the way it is, you know. Fair enough, their country, up to them. Not for me. We were still going out for restaurants, we were still socialising, we were going wherever we wanted to go. What changed is when I went into the bank, I had to wear a mask to go in the bank. And I said to the security guard who I know one day, I said, you know what, if I'd have come in here last year with a mask on, you'd have shot me before I got to the counter. So, 15-minute cities, what's all that about? Well, when I was a senior land buyer back in the day, we would buy 1, 2, 3 acres, hopefully ex-industrial sites that you could get planning permission on easily. But the big desire was to get a couple of 100 acres. And the reason for that is you would put an overall plan in for what they call work live. And that would be like planning a self-contained village where you had shops, hairdressers, all the local amenities. You'd build in the centre of the village, your supermarket, everything. Doctor's surgery, the Monty, dentist, everything. And then you would have nice housing, which would be like management business owner housing. You'd have some factories, you'd have some offices, etc, etc. And the theory was that if you lived on there, you didn't really need to go out much. You didn't need a car. You could cycle to work or walk to work. You know, recreational places in the centre of the village, dotted about, schools, the Monty. And it made a lot of sense. But are the 15-minute cities, are they another form of control? You don't need to go there. I can see the day, I mean, climate change. This leads on to climate change. Climate change. The climate's always changing. The climate change has changed since the Earth was formed. Science, real science, ice core samples deep down, scientists can identify what the temperature was at any given time. Science has proven that the temperature was umpteen degrees hotter before man came on the Earth, never mind an internal combustion engine. And you get these politicians who fly off to Davos or wherever they're going and to lectures about climate change, and they fly in private aeroplanes. I mean, the runway at Davos is absolutely littered with private jets of the wealthy and the leaders going off there for the jollies, eating Wagyu steaks and telling us to eat bugs. So it's climate change, it's conspiracy theory. These nutters just stop oil. Well, if you stopped oil, half your pharmaceuticals would disappear. Products in your home, plastics, all sorts of stuff would disappear. Clothing, a lot would disappear. Fertilizers, a lot would disappear. And how would you cope then? Well, be easy. The Earth is overpopulated. So Agenda 21, which is on the UN website, talks about rewilding and depopulation. So is that a conspiracy theory? But it's on their website. You can go and read it. I used to tell friends 10 years ago, I used to say, well, I'm telling you what's coming, the way it's going. And what is coming is, I'm going to go to Thailand next year for a holiday. No. What do you mean, no? I've got my money here, you know, sell me a ticket. No. Your social credit score isn't high enough. You don't need to take that flight. Already in France, loads of local flights have been cancelled. Into France flights, and they say you can go on the train. It's not ecologically sound to fly there, but the train's going to take me 12 hours and I can be there in half an hour on an airplane. No. Computer says no, you're not travelling halfway around the world for a holiday. Go to Blackpool. You know what I'm saying? I used to tell friends this and they say, oh God, you know, you're off again in your conspiracy theories. Now lots of the exact same friends are saying to me, my God, the way it's going, you are absolutely right. Britain, the British government, the Labour government that's in at the minute, and I'm not being political one way or the other because they're both two cheeks of the same arse. They're both as bad as each other. But they've just given out a huge contract for facial recognition cameras, and everybody in Britain you're going to be on a database. And people say, well, you know, I've nothing to hide. I mean, every time I go for my 90 days, they take my picture, and that's facial recognition, and I've nothing to hide. I'm not doing anything wrong here. I don't break the law. So The worst I do is a few beers. But it's not the point that you've nothing to hide. In China, they've got all these, not only facial recognition, but gait recognition. Not the 5-barred gait, not your front gait in the garden, but the way you walk. So you can have a hat on, sunglasses and a COVID mask, and they still know who you are by the way you walk. You're on that database. And if you jaywalk in one of the towns or cities, you're fined, and that money comes out of your digital bank account without you even knowing. And the next thing is, not only do that, they publicly shame you. Ying Wong has been jaywalking and he's been fined and blah, blah, blah. You know, we're getting to 1984. We're getting to a situation where they want to control us. And the way to control the masses is money. They've got control of the money. They've got control of the computer says no. Then the next thing is food. And the way that farmers have been attacked for this last 10 or 15 years, and farmers. My uncle had a 100-acre dairy farm. This is a true story. And him and my auntie and their children had built this. They originally rented it, then they bought it. They bought it off the Ministry of Defence, because it was part of a land owned by a munitions manufacturer. And they bought this farm, and over a lifetime they built this herd up, and they had milk rounds, etc., etc. And then the EU said to him, well, we'll pay you more than what you're making from working 7 days a week and working damned hard. We'll pay you more to leave your land fallow. So in other words, just let the weeds grow, let it rewild. So my uncle sold off his herd, sold off his milk quota, and sat at home in front of the fire, enjoying his life in a massively paid retirement by the EU. That must have stopped by now because of Britain left the EU. So I don't know what's happening with that now. It doesn't make sense, does it? Cows and sheep, you must stop eating meat. Cows and sheep fart too much. It's damaging the climate. What a load of bollocks. What a load of cobblers. If climate change was that serious, all through Asia and Africa, you see these wagons and cars chugging along, spewing out thick black smoke that's going up into the atmosphere. Go to the Philippines. Burning rubbish is a way of getting rid of it. They'll burn tires, they'll burn polystyrene. The wars, a missile goes into a building, plof, thick black smoke goes up. Where's that going? You know, but we can't have a cow farting. You know what I'm saying? And it's like here in Asia, you've got the burning season, where farmers clear land and clear fields by burning. They've done it for centuries. It's traditional, and we get all this terrible pollution. And Laos, Burma, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, they burn. If it was a real crisis, governments around the world will put pressure on these governments to stop the burning and find alternative methods. And there are alternative methods, far better to compost the waste that comes off. There you go, conspiracy theories or conspiracy facts. You decide. Bye.